A devastating season-ending injury for LSU. How do they replace Jacobian Guillory? We're talking about it. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Glad to have you aboard with us here. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get great podcasts. Of course, available on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. Today's episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. Some pretty stunning Pro Football Focus grades from Saturday's win over Nicholls. We'll let you hear from Brian Kelly with some concerning comments about his defense. But we have to start with the incredibly disappointing news that LSU senior defensive lineman Jacobian Guillory tore his Achilles Saturday night against Nicholls. His season is over. I don't want to overstate this, but some of you may know that I'm also the publisher of LouisianaSports.net. It's a print media website, a written word website. And before the season started, we did a station survey of our entire lineup at 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. So that's T-Bob Hebert and Jacob Hester, who, of course, played at LSU. They're our morning show host. Hunt Palmer, who's our midday guy, our LSU writer, and our editor over at LouisianaSports.net, me, a lot of our other contributors. And Jacob Hester and I, when we were asked the most indispensable player for LSU this year, had the same answer. And it was Jacobian Guillory. Hester wrote, I know you normally wouldn't hear a defensive tackle being picked in a category like this, but as we all know, it's probably the thinnest position group on the team. Guillory is the only player at the position that you've seen play at a high level in the SEC. If he goes down, you'd be counting on an unproven transfer or a true freshman. Again, that's a former All-SEC running back in Jacob Hester, played 6 years in the NFL. My answer also was Jacobian Guillory. And I wrote, there is an embarrassment of riches offensively, so they can overcome any loss aside from Garrett Nussmeier. They have a lot of bodies at defensive tackle, but Guillory is their best and most experienced. If he went down, there is no clear answer of who would be next up. So I'm not plucking this from the air today. I'm not overreacting to the news. Before the season started, I wrote and said on air, Jacobian Guillory was LSU's most indispensable player because of how thin you are at defensive tackle. Let me go back and remind you. After spring, Brian Kelly made it pretty clear. Their number one target in the transfer portal was defensive tackle. They went after two guys, Dominic Williams from TCU. They went after a defensive tackle from Michigan State as well. The kid from Michigan State ended up at Miami, and Williams ended up at Oklahoma. LSU did land Gio Paez from Wisconsin and JVR Suggs from Grand Valley State. So you have some veteran players, some older guys in those two. But what you don't have is experience or guys that have played at a high level and been productive. Let me lay this out for you. Jacobian Guillory, in his fifth season at LSU, had played in 41 games, but Saturday against Nicholls was only his fifth start. So even for Guillory, who's played a ton of games for you, still was more of a rotational guy throughout his career. After Guillory, Gio Paez has been starting next to him. Paez is in his sixth season, the Wisconsin transfer. He's played in 34 games with just 8 starts. Let me remind you, he's in his sixth collegiate season, and Saturday against Nicholls was his 8th start. You've got Sean Washington. Sean Washington played 1 game at Georgia as a freshman, went JUCO a year ago. Now he's at LSU. So he's played in 3 games as part of an SEC school. You've got Jalen Lee, who played 3 seasons at Florida, now in his 2nd season at LSU. So his 5th collegiate season, he's played in 34 games, but he's made just 4 career starts. JVR Suggs, that's the Grand Valley State transfer. He's in his third year, 2 years at Grand Valley State, now his first season at LSU. He's played in 25 games and made 11 career starts. But again, he was at the Division II level before coming to the SEC. It's a far cry. You've got Kimo Makanaeole, who switched from offensive line to defensive line. And then you've got Dominic McKinley and Ahmad Bro, two very highly touted freshmen. Bro, Brian Kelly most recently, touted as maybe the most impressive of those freshmen. I lay all that out to say now you can understand why I thought Guillory was LSU's most indispensable player. Listen, you wouldn't want to lose anybody on the offensive side. Garrett Nussmeier obviously is the answer. But on the offensive side, you've seen the abundance of riches at receiver, at tight end, with some really talented young players in Kamorian Pimpton and Trey'Dez Green. You could even look at a guy like Will Campbell, but God forbid if something happened to Will Campbell, you'd kick Emory Jones over to left tackle and you still have a first-round pick playing that position. So you can run through the lineup and you can see where they have depth and experience and bodies and skins on the wall. They just don't at defensive tackle. And I don't think Jacobian Guillory was an All-American or a guy that was threatening to be a day 1 or 2 draft pick, but he was a draftable player and your most veteran and most gifted defensive tackle on the interior. So where they go from here is a gigantic question mark. I would like to say, similar my feelings with John Emery, I feel about Jacobian Guillory. Brian Kelly said in this preseason, when Guillory showed up on campus, or when Kelly got here, Guillory just wasn't a very good football player. A little bit of a hothead and just really needed to refine himself. And he's worked very hard over the last 2 years, now into his third season under Brian Kelly, to do just that. And when you went out and watched fall camp, it was just very noticeable when you looked at the defensive linemen working with Bo Davis that Guillory was the most polished, the most powerful, the most technical. This is a massive loss for LSU. Now, if you want a glass half full perspective, I can show you 2014. And 2014 is a year where LSU had a couple of guys leave early for the draft, and Anthony Johnson and Ego Ferguson. And you ended up with Christian Lockature, a true sophomore, as your most veteran defensive lineman. And you had a young guy in Devon Gottschall, who was from Plaquemine, who was a defensive end at Plaquemine and tore his ACL his senior year at Plaquemine. And as a true freshman, because you were so thin on numbers, he ended up starting for you at defensive tackle. A high school defensive end who tore his ACL as a senior ended up starting at defensive tackle on the interior. Now we know Gottschall went on to have a great LSU career, drafted, had a really good pro career as well with the Dolphins and the Patriots, and has been a really good player. Maybe that guy's on the roster. Maybe Dominic McKinley, maybe Ahmad Bro, maybe one of those young guys is ready to step up and play that big role. But that's really your option right now. You've got bodies. You've got Paez in Washington, Lee, Suggs, McKinley, Bro, even Kimo Makanaeole. You got 7 bodies left. Can any of them play at a high enough level to help you win games? Going to find out in very short order because at this point you don't have an option. I would like to say also just about Jacobian Guillory. He's a guy that worked really hard, similar to John Emery, battled, could have left, stayed, waited his turn. This was going to be his opportunity. Brian Kelly told us he recently became a father as well. So, a lot of things in his life have allowed him to mature to this point. And this was supposed to be a really good year for him, a big season for him. And unfortunately, it's over just 2 games in. If we go back and look at my what to watch, if you go back and if you have the tolerance, you can go back and watch this episode or listen to Locked on LSU from my pregame for LSU and Nicholls, my what to watch episode. The number one thing I told you was health, because I told you a year ago against Army, Zy Alexander tore his ACL, and he was your best cornerback. You just want to get through these games healthy, and unfortunately, you didn't. You've lost your best defensive tackle for the season. Kyron Lacey got banged up in this game. Jordan Allen got banged up in this game. Garrett Nussmeier did as well. begs the question why you play games like this against Nicholls with so much to lose and so little to gain. And unfortunately for LSU, they lost the biggest piece of their interior, the defensive line, in Jacobian Guillory. Torn Achilles, he's done for the year. So how do they pivot now with South Carolina coming up on Saturday? First road SEC games. We got to talk about that. We'll do it as we continue. And we'll let you hear from Brian Kelly after the win over Nicholls on Saturday. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Pleased to tell you about our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. I will on Monday at 3 o'clock start a 3-hour radio show. And I don't know, about 5 or 10 minutes before that show, I'm going to take a 5 Hour Energy. I've done that for years now. Literally a decade, where every day before my radio show around 2:50, 2:55, I take a 5 Hour Energy. And the thing that I love the most about it, a couple things. Most importantly, it gives me the energy and the focus to get through a 3-hour radio show. I love that it's easy as well. I mean, you could take it in seconds and it works quickly. I also love the fact that there's no sugar. And so I have never gotten a crash. You hear some people talk about that, like the crash effect from energy drinks or things like that. And I've never gotten that with 5 Hour Energy. So if you need to help power through the day, get through your to-do list, maybe you're going for a workout and you need that extra boost of energy. Maybe you're just going to be watching a full day of football. Like, Monday Night Football, that's what you're watching, or whatever it may be. 5 Hour Energy, take one in the morning, help you start your day, or in the evening to help you stay up all night to watch football. Just get in the zone with 5 Hour Energy. Gives you that alert feeling and the energy you need to get in the zone and get through your day. It's 5 Hour Energy, no sugar, convenient portable size. It's a great pick-me-up to help you get stuff done. It's 5 Hour Energy. So go to the website, 5hourenergy.com. It's the number 5, 5hourenergy.com to get some 5 Hour Energy product today. You can use my promo code. It's Locked On CFB. That's Locked On CFB to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September the 30th on one order, cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. That's 5hourenergy.com. So Brian Kelly spoke to the media after the game, and if you heard my recap episode, it was really just me riffing off the cuff, running through some of my notes from the game, my immediate reaction. And if you missed that show, my Cliff's Notes is, I know there's a lot of LSU fans that are upset with the way the game played out. I know it. And I know you want me to pound the table and yell and scream and rant and rave and talk about how bad the team is, how unacceptable the game is against Nicholls. I'm just not there. I want to be very clear. I'm not telling you what happened on Saturday was acceptable. I'm not telling you running 21 times for 64 yards is acceptable against an FCS opponent is acceptable. I'm not telling you letting an FCS opponent run for 150 yards against you was acceptable. It's not. I fully understand everybody's angst and frustration. I also watched the greatest team that LSU had prior to 2019, the 2011 Tigers, play a home game against Western Kentucky, and they went to halftime with a 14-7 lead. That was a Western Kentucky team, by the way, that finished 5-5 on the season. I have watched great teams struggle in these stupid, meaningless games that nobody cares about, that nobody's up for, that the fans aren't excited to see, and neither are the players. And Brian Kelly, whether you want to believe this or not, whether you want to talk about how this is an excuse, whatever it may be, Brian Kelly said the exact truth after the game on Saturday.
Look, I'm not here to make a million excuses, but that was a team that was fatigued, and it affected them. Now, that's not going to be their best work, and we still were able to, win by 23 points, and they're not going to say that was their A work. We have to do a lot of things better. So we're going to watch the film. We're going to critically evaluate it. We're going to say, look, we have to bite down harder next time if you're in that kind of situation. But, again, that wasn't our best work.
He's right. It wasn't their best game. And I want to reiterate, I am not saying what happened on Saturday was acceptable or I'm thrilled or pumped or anything of the sort. I just don't care. Brian Kelly is right. There is a human element to that game. You spent all offseason getting fired up for USC. You fly out to Vegas. You play that game. physical game. You lose at the very end. You fly home. You get home at 5 a.m. on Monday. You got to practice on Tuesday. You're getting ready on a quick turnaround to play Nicholls State, an FCS opponent. Nobody cares. And it went the way it went. And I get it. It feels terrible when they scored on the second play of the second half to get within 23-21. But look what happened after that. After the second play of the second half, you go down and score a touchdown. First play of the ensuing drive, PJ Woodland forces a fumble. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plays later, you score again. It's 37-21. You force a 3-and-out, you score again. It's 44-21. That's at the end of the third quarter, and that would be your final score. You stamped it out. You finally got it together in the second half, and you wore them down, and you beat them as well you should. We all would have loved to have seen it happen earlier in the game. It didn't. But one of the other things Brian Kelly said about his team is about some of the conversations people are having about this team and drawing conclusions after just 2 games.
Each week is a week in itself. So be careful about the narratives of this team is this team is that. I know what this team can be.
It's interesting that he said be careful with narratives, because he also said this about his defense.
Defensively, we are who we are. I mean, there's nobody else on. I can't, we're not benching anybody. I mean, the guys we got are the guys we got. I mean, we played without our best defensive tackle the whole game. So the guys we have in there, we got to keep coaching them. We got to get them better. And they're going to have to play next week against South Carolina just better than they played this week.
I don't know if you saw the same comedy I did in the unintentional comedy. Brian Kelly saying beware of narratives, and then saying we are what we are defensively. And I do understand what he's saying, though, because you can't go into the portal now. You can't go make a trade. The guys you have are who you have. So there are some options, though. And a big option, I think, is Zy Alexander. And we saw Zy Alexander on Saturday against Nicholls play really well. In the second half, he got in there. He made 3 tackles. He had a pass breakup. We're going to get in just a moment into the PFF rankings for LSU in this game, and you're going to see it sort of validates the feeling that you had about Zy Alexander. And if Zy Alexander's back, then that allows you to put Sage Ryan back at safety, which is his more natural position that he has never gotten to play at LSU. Now, all of a sudden, PJ Woodland keeps getting more veteran, keeps getting better. You've got Ashton Stamps. You've got Zy Alexander. All of a sudden, you're better at corner. And Sage can go play safety, which makes you better at safety because that's his natural position. And you can see how there are opportunities there. I don't know what the option is on the interior of the defensive line. We talked about it there at the start with Jacobian Guillory's injury. But there are ways, I think, that you can continue to grow and develop guys to continue to get better and improve. But as far as the big picture of you can't go add anybody at this point, Brian Kelly's right. The other gripe people had after the game was about the running game or the lack thereof. And Brian Kelly had an explanation for why the game played out the way it did.
We want a running game that balances our offense, but I know there were a lot of plays that we checked out of at the line of scrimmage because of the extra hat, so to speak, which is part of our offense.
Okay. That is a completely sensible explanation. If an opponent is crowding the line of scrimmage and adding an extra defender to the box, then you check out of the run and you throw the ball. That's completely understandable. There is a world where you could, against an FCS opponent, just say, whatever, we're going to go too tight to fullback and just run it at you. But I don't know that there's any point this season where LSU is going to be that team where you go too tight and a fullback and you just run the ball at somebody. What this team is best at doing, clearly, is throwing the football. You have an elite pass blocking offensive line. I think we would all agree to that, regardless of everyone's concern or criticism over the run blocking. You have an elite pass blocking offensive line. Garrett Nussmeier in 2 games hasn't been touched. And Nussmeier clearly is a very good passer. Nussmeier had 6 touchdowns on the day, 27 of 37, 302, and 6 passing touchdowns. And you have a bevy of really talented receivers. So that's just what you're going to be. I don't know that I see a game where you run it 38 times and throw it 21, the inverse of what you saw on Saturday, because that just doesn't play to this team's strength. So go play to your strength, which is throwing the football. Would you have preferred LSU go too tight and just run it just because? What does that really prove? Go improve at the thing that you are. And what they are clearly is a team that's very good at throwing the football. And you have to use your passing game as an extension of your running game, especially if you're not going to be a dominant run team. We'll see if they can be. And you'll start to get that answer this week against South Carolina, because South Carolina is pretty atrocious on the back end, and they're pretty anemic offensively. But the one place where they're pretty good is on their defensive front. And that could be a real challenge for this LSU team. So I don't know if LSU is going to Columbia with the idea of running the football. I think they're going to go with the idea of being what they are, which is a team that's a really good pass blocking offensive line. You got a veteran quarterback who can spin it, a ton of really good receivers, and South Carolina don't have answers for them. I think that's going to be LSU's plan. So if you're thinking LSU's going there to run for 180 against South Carolina, I think you're going to be disappointed. But that doesn't mean LSU can't win the game. We'll talk about the LSU-South Carolina game plenty as we move throughout this week. One more thing to put a button on the Nicholls State game. Pro Football Focus put out their grades for LSU against Nicholls. And this is very, very telling. And for a lot of you, it's going to validate a lot of what you've been saying the past 2 games. And for some of you, for more than a year. That's next. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Glad to tell you about our friends over at Ibotta. Hey, look, we all buy things, right? We all spend money, whether it's you're buying things for your tailgate or you're buying clothes, snacks for the kids. You're buying a ton. Don't stress, though, about the cost. Ibotta is an app that allows you to get cash back on all of your purchases. So if you're taking a vacation, maybe you're going on a road trip to watch the Tigers play, wherever you're going to make memories, make sure when you're stocking up on everything from your grilling favorites to your tailgate supplies, make sure you are earning cash back on every purchase with Ibotta. So you don't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs on the grill or whatever it is. You can get both. Ibotta is a free app if you've never used it. It's a free app that lets you get cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items, groceries and beauty supplies, toys for the kids. Make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 a year. That's just for using the app. You can save on over 2,400 brands, shop at more than 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery store, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, so many more. It's time you join the more than 50 million users that use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Here's what you do. Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta and using the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. So go to the App Store or Google Play, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back. Use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Again, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. LSU beats Nicholls 44-21. The way it played out didn't please many LSU fans, and I understand that. But I wanted to reference Pro Football Focus grades for the LSU Nicholls game. And I want to be very clear. If you've ever heard any of my content ever, you've heard me say this probably. I don't look at Pro Football Focus as the metric or the standard. It is just a metric. It is a tool that people use to try to gain context on certain things. But it is very well respected metric, and a lot of people use it. Well, Pro Football Focus graded they do this for every game. They grade every player in the game. And I thought it was interesting, and this is up, by the way, at LouisianaSports.net if you want to go read it. Totally free website that I'm the publisher of, and highly recommend you bookmark it. And I asked Hunt Palmer, our LSU beat writer, every year to grab, for every game, this year, to grab the top 5 and the bottom 5 players, according to Pro Football Focus, from every LSU game. let me run through the top 5. The highest graded player, and by the way, offense, defense, all combined. The highest graded player for LSU with an 82.3 was Zy Alexander. Zy Alexander is rounding into form. When Brian Kelly said a bit ago that we are what we are defensively, I disagree, because when you get Zy Alexander back, and if you have a difference-making cornerback on the field, then all of a sudden that improves your defense in every level of it. Braden Swinson was the second highest graded player. Not surprising there, or maybe surprising to some of you that the top 2 graded players were actually defensive players. And Swinson's been very good, very athletic off the edge. Garrett Nussmeier, 300-yard performance, was 3rd. Greg Penn, linebacker, was 4th. And Gabe Relaford was 5th, the freshman defensive end. 4 of your top 5 highest graded players in the game, according to Pro Football Focus, were defensive players. Now, Relaford, I will tell you, and I've said this often, that Relaford and Kalaj Cobbins are studs. Gabe Relaford wears number 19. Cobbins wears 48. Those, when you think about what LSU looked like in its heyday on the defensive front, those 2 guys are what it's supposed to look like. And they're going to be very good. And I would not be surprised one iota as this season goes along, if Blake Baker is looking for answers to improve that defense, if he doesn't start leaning on some of the young guys, and Relaford and Cobbins could very well be in the mix. Now, the flip side, the bottom 5, is a little bit more of the disappointing part. Because every player I'm about to name to you are players that LSU needs to count on for a big impact. And these were your lowest graded players of the game. The 5th lowest graded player was JVR Suggs. That's the defensive tackle transfer from Grand Valley State. Talked about replacing Jacobian Guillory. Suggs, who came in as a transfer and is in his 3rd year of college, is one of those guys who very well could be one you count on. And he was your 5th lowest graded player. Your 4th lowest graded player was Ashton Stamps, who is thought to be your best cornerback. Maybe it's a situation where PJ Woodland and Zy Alexander become your starters. Woodland had a beautiful PBU. He forced a fumble and recovered the fumble he forced. Maybe that's something we start to see. The 3rd lowest graded player was Caleb Jackson, the running back. And my hand is in the air. Y'all, I said that I thought Caleb Jackson is the guy. If there's one guy who nobody in the SEC knows today that will absolutely know by the end of the league, or end of the season, is Caleb Jackson. He was your 3rd lowest graded player. And so far, through 2 games this season, I don't know that I could have foreseen Caleb Jackson being as ineffective through 2 games as he has been. If you look at Caleb Jackson's rushing totals, 13 attempts for 42 yards. That's in 2 games. 13 attempts for 42 yards through 2 games. Hard to imagine. 2nd lowest graded player was Shelton Sampson. Brian Kelly called him out by name this week. Said after Kyle Parker's injury, they had to get Shelton Sampson up and ready to play and ready to contribute. They threw him a ball on the first possession, the 4th play of the game. He was open, caught the ball, was out of bounds. Nussmeier threw him out of bounds. He just wasn't targeted very much. When you're looking for somebody to be someone who can stretch the field, blow the top off the defense, be a game breaker in place of the injured Chris Hilton, you thought Kyle Parker could be that guy. He's injured. Shelton Sampson needs to step up. Hasn't happened so far. And this is the one that is going to cause probably every one of you to say, I knew it. The lowest graded player for LSU against Nicholls State, offense, defense, special teams, the lowest graded player on the entire team, according to Pro Football Focus, with a 53.4 grade, was Harold Perkins. Y'all, Harold Perkins is a special athlete. We have seen it. That's not guessing. It's not high school rating stuff. Like, we saw him as a freshman take over against Ole Miss. We saw him take over against Arkansas. We have seen Harold Perkins do it. He spied Jalen Milroe. We have seen Harold Perkins do it in SEC play. against Bryce Young. Forgive me, his freshman season against Bryce Young. We have seen Harold Perkins do it. I understand Harold Perkins wants to be a 3-down linebacker in the NFL. He wants to play off ball. He is fast, athletic, agile, quick. He is not sudden and powerful and strong, which you need to be to shed blocks from 300-pounders. You need to be instinctive to be able to go meet a running back in the hole. And unfortunately, a supreme talent is being wasted because he's out of position. I know what Blake Baker said in the offseason, that he feels Harold Perkins physically can do it and it's just about reps. But are you really going to let Harold Perkins be a liability on defense while he hopefully gets better as the season goes along? He's your lowest graded player, not just among the linebackers, not just among defense. He was your lowest graded player on the entire team, even if Pro Football Focus isn't 100% accurate. The lowest graded player on the team tells you it was not a good day for Harold Perkins against an FCS opponent. You're going to need better. And you have better options at off-ball linebackers. And you've got Tylen Singleton and Devon Keys. You've got Xavier Atkins. You've got young guys who can maybe step up, who are more natural to that position. You've got Witt and West Weeks and Greg Penn. Greg Penn, by the way, who we just said was one of your highest rated players. Greg Penn was your 4th highest rated player in this game. Brian Kelly said it a bit ago. We played the audio. You are what you are defensively. I disagree. You can put Harold Perkins in a role where he's more effective. You can get Zy Alexander back and make you better at cornerback. That allows you to move Sage Ryan to safety, which makes you better. You could play young, talented guys who don't have experience, but the veteran guys you have don't have experience either. Play the guys with the higher ceiling and let them get better as the season goes along. You got 3 more games. You got 3 more games and an open date before Ole Miss comes in here. You got to be playing your best. And in order to be playing your best, you're going to have to move the chairs around defensively. See if they do it. Okay, thanks so much for being here, y'all. Monday, Brian Kelly meets with the Porters. You better believe we'll have a full recap, reaction, all that good stuff on Tuesday's edition of Locked on LSU. Hey, do us a favor. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And be sure to let a friend know that if they love the Tigers, we got you here every single day for Locked on LSU, your team every day.